Your father never left this room, the little girl told the millionaire. But when they enter the room and discover the truth, everyone is shocked. Comment telling me what you thought of this story with a rating from 0 to 10 and let me know what city you're watching from. I really want to know if you liked my story and get to know you better, so please subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The smell of fresh bread still filled the air at Central Bakery as Ethan Caldwell adjusted the final details of the display case. At 42, the businessman had built a culinary empire in Crestwood that began with a small family-owned bakery and now spanned 5 prosperous establishments in the Midwestern town. His hands, always meticulously clean, arranged the donuts and croissants with the precision of someone who controlled every aspect of his life since losing his father in the terrible fire 2 years ago. The Thursday afternoon was unfolding like any other. Employees greeted Ethan with a mixture of respect and the fear his controlling personality inspired. He checked spreadsheets, verified inventory, and supervised every detail of the operation, with the obsession of someone who had learned that relaxing his vigilance could result in irreparable losses. The trauma of losing Benedict, his 69-year-old father, had turned Ethan into a man who left nothing to chance. That's when she appeared. The little girl emerged at the bakery's entrance like a fragile afternoon apparition. Her dark hair was disheveled, her simple clothes showed signs of a life of hardship, but it was her eyes that caught the attention. Large, expressive, filled with a sadness no child should know. Lily, only 4 years old, clutched a crumpled piece of paper that seemed to be her only treasure. The staff tried to gently turn her away, assuming she was another child begging, but she insisted with a determination surprising for her age. "I need to speak with Mr. Ethan," she repeated in her small but firm voice, pressing the paper to her chest as if it were a sacred relic. When Ethan finally approached, intrigued by the girl's persistence, she held out the paper to him. It was a hand-scribbled address, clearly the address of his main company. "Where did you get this?" he asked, crouching down to her level. "Your father gave it." "To me," Lily replied with devastating simplicity. The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. For a moment, the world around him seemed to stop. The bakery's noises faded into a distant echo as he processed what he had just heard. My father passed away 2 years ago," he said, his voice trembling slightly. Lily shook her head with childish conviction. "No, he didn't. He's in a room and he never leaves." Her small hands fumbled in the torn pocket of her dress and pulled out a faded photograph. "He showed me this picture and said, you needed to know." Ethan took the photo with trembling hands. The image showed a building he didn't recognize, a simple housing complex with peeling walls and small windows. None of it made sense. His father had died in the fire that completely destroyed the family home. He himself had identified the charred belongings, organized the service, and wept over a sealed coffin. "Where did you see my father?" he asked, struggling to maintain his composure. "At Grandma Constance's house. He stays in a small room and sometimes tells stories about you. He said you have very beautiful bakeries and that you're very smart." Lily's eyes filled with tears, "but he's also sad because he misses you." Ethan's heart raced. Constance. The name sparked a vague memory, someone his mother Delia occasionally mentioned, but he could never quite place who she was. The possibility of his father being alive was simultaneously the answer to his deepest prayers and the beginning of a nightmare of doubt and questions. "Can you take me to him?" Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Lily nodded solemnly. "Grandma Constance said that one day I could bring you if you really wanted to see your father." Ethan looked around the bakery, at the organized and controlled life he had built as a fortress against pain. In a few minutes, a 4-year-old child had shaken the very foundations of his reality. If his father was truly alive, it meant that everything he believed about that terrible night was wrong. It meant he had spent 2 years grieving a loss that might not have happened. "Let's go," he said finally, taking off his apron and grabbing his car keys. As they left the bakery, Lily held Ethan's hand with the natural confidence of a child. "Your father is going to be so happy," she said. "He talks about you every day." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. If this was true, if his father was really alive somewhere waiting for him, then his entire life had been built on a lie. And if it was a lie, he needed to understand why such a young child would invent something so cruel. The car moved through the streets of Crestwood toward a destination that could change everything. In the back seat, Lily hummed a children's song, unaware that she had just detonated a bomb in the heart of the man driving her home. Ethan drove with sweaty hands, preparing himself for the most terrifying and hopeful possibility of his life. The housing complex was on the outskirts of Crestwood, an area Ethan rarely visited in his life, sheltered by the walls of his prosperity. Simple houses lined up in monotonous rows, with small yards where clothes fluttered on the line and children played in puddles from the recent rain. Lily guided Ethan through the narrow streets with the familiarity of someone who knew every stone in the path. "It's there," she pointed to a single-story house with faded walls and a small porch where potted plants struggled for sunlight. Ms. Constance's residence was no different from the others, except for the extra care visible in the clean sidewalk and the organized little garden. Ethan stopped the car and sat for a few seconds, his hands still gripping the steering wheel. His heart was beating so loudly he could hear it in his own ears. The whole way, he had mentally prepared for disappointment, to find out this was just the fantasy of a lonely child. But now, facing the simple house, he felt a mixture of hope and terror that paralyzed him. "Come on," Lily said, getting out of the car as naturally as if she were home. "Grandma Constance is waiting." An elderly woman appeared at the door before they even reached the porch. Constance Sanders, at 78, had completely white hair tied in a simple bun and wore a faded but clean and pressed blue dress. Her eyes, surprisingly clear for her age, fixed on Ethan with an expression that mixed relief and apprehension. "So you're Ethan," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "Lily told me you were coming, but I hardly believed it." "Ma'am." "Constance?" Ethan hesitated, still processing the reality of the situation. "The girl told me that my father is alive, yes," Constance interrupted, wiping her hands on her apron. "Benedict has been here with me for 2 years, since that terrible night of the fire." Ethan's legs nearly gave out. Hearing his father's name spoken in the present tense, as if he still breathed, still existed, was like an electric shock. "That's impossible. I saw the wreckage. The house was completely destroyed." "The house was indeed destroyed," confirmed Constance, gesturing for them to enter. "But your father wasn't there. When the fire started, he had gone out to get medicine at the pharmacy, and when he came back, he found everything in flames." The inside of the house was simple but welcoming. Old but well-maintained furniture filled the small living room, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee mixed with the scent of garden flowers coming through the window. Lily ran to a corner where some toys were scattered, clearly her special space in the house. "When I found Benedict that night," Constance continued, motioning for Ethan to sit on the sofa, "he was desperate, trying to get into the burning house to look for you and Gavin. He was injured, burned on his hands and arms, and completely distraught." "Gavin," Ethan murmured his younger brother's name. "He said he arrived after me that night. He said he found everything destroyed." Constance exchanged a meaningful look with Lily, as if sharing a heavy secret. "Your brother arrived before you, Ethan. I saw him leave the house just minutes before the fire started. Ethan's world trembled on its foundations. What are you saying? I'm saying Gavin left the house and then it caught fire. And when your father arrived and tried to go in to save you, I had to pull him away from the flames. Constance's voice grew softer. He was screaming both your names, saying he had to save you. Ethan felt nausea rising in his throat. If what Constance was saying was true, then Gavin... Why didn't you tell the police? Why didn't you come find me? Because when Benedict got a little better from the burns, he begged me not to say anything, she replied, tears starting to stream down her wrinkled face. He said Gavin was his son, and there must be an explanation for everything. He said he'd rather you believe he was gone than have to see Gavin arrested. Where is he? Ethan asked, his voice barely a whisper. Where is my father? Constance stood up slowly. He sleeps most of the time now. After the accident, his mind got confused. The doctors say it was the shock, the trauma. Sometimes he's lucid for a few hours. Sometimes he goes days without recognizing anyone. She led him through a narrow hallway to a closed door. Lily is the only one who can make him remember things. I don't know why, but when she tells him stories, Benedict becomes more alert. Ethan stopped in front of the door, his hand trembling on the doorknob. On the other side of that door was the man he had mourned, for whom he had held a service, whose loss had shaped every decision of the last 2 years of his life. He talks about you every day when he's well, Constance whispered. He tells Lily about the bakeries, about how you were always so determined, about how proud he is of the son who built a prosperous life. Why did you do this? Ethan asked, still lacking the courage to open the door. Why did you take care of him all these years? Constance lowered her eyes. Because Delia was my sister. The shock of this revelation hit Ethan like a lightning bolt. His mother, Delia, had passed away when he was 15, but he vaguely remembered her mentioning a sister she hadn't spoken to in years because of some old family feud. When I saw Benedict that night, injured and desperate, I couldn't abandon him. It was like my chance to make up for all the years I spent away from my sister because of my foolish pride. Lily appeared beside them, holding Ethan's hand. Grandpa Benedict is awake today, she said in her soft voice. I heard him say your name earlier. Ethan took a deep breath and finally opened the door. The room was small and simple, with a single bed where a man he almost didn't recognize lay. Benedict had aged far beyond the 2 years that had passed. His hair was completely white, his face thinner, but they were the same kind eyes Ethan remembered from his childhood. Dad? Ethan whispered. Benedict turned his head slowly, and for a moment that felt like an eternity, his eyes met his son's. A faint smile formed on his dry lips. Ethan. My son. You came. The reunion was punctuated by tears Ethan couldn't control. He knelt beside the bed, holding his father's frail hand, feeling the rough skin and the scars from the burns that still marked his fingers. Benedict kept his eyes fixed on his son's face, as if afraid he would disappear if he blinked. I thought you were... Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. I know, my son. I know, Benedict murmured, his voice weak but filled with emotion. Constance told me you held a service for me, that you cried. Forgive me for not coming to you sooner. Lily approached the bed with the naturalness of someone who visited that room daily. Grandpa Benedict, Ethan really came, just like you always said he would. The old man smiled at the girl with an affection that deeply touched Ethan. It was clear that Lily had become a source of light in his father's dark life during those 2 lost years. Tell him about the bakeries, Grandpa, Lily said, climbing onto the chair beside the bed. Tell him how you... Said he was the best son in the world. Benedict tried to sit up straighter, propped by pillows. Ethan, my boy, Constance brought newspapers sometimes. I saw the articles about your bakeries, how they've grown, how you've become a respected businessman. His voice trembled with pride. I always knew you'd be someone special. Dad, why didn't you come find me? Why did you let me believe I was alone in the world? The pain in Ethan's voice was palpable. Benedict's face clouded over. Because it was my fault, Ethan. Everything that happened that night was my fault. What do you mean, your fault? Benedict looked at Constance, who had remained at the door. She nodded almost imperceptibly, as if giving him permission to continue. Your brother Gavin, he was in trouble. Big debts, problems he didn't have the courage to tell me about properly. But I found out... Benedict paused, gathering strength to go on. He owed money to dangerous people, a lot of money. Ethan felt a cold knot in his stomach. And what does that have to do with the fire? Gavin came to me that night. He was desperate, said if he didn't pay the debts, by the end of the week those people would hurt you too, said they knew where you lived, where your bakeries were. The revelation hit Ethan like a punch. He was trying to protect me? Gavin asked me to sell the house, said he could pay off everything with the money, but the house was in my name, and I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to help him, but because I wanted to understand the situation better before making such a drastic decision. Lily, who was listening with surprising attention for a 4-year-old, held Benedict's hand. Grandpa, tell. The sad part now. Gavin interpreted my hesitation as a refusal. He became distraught, said I didn't understand the gravity of the situation. We started arguing and he said if I didn't sell the house willingly, he'd find a way to convince me. The silence that followed was heavy with foreboding. Ethan was already beginning to imagine what came next, but he didn't want to believe it. I went out to get my medicine at the pharmacy, like I always did on Tuesdays. When I came back, the house was in flames. Gavin was outside, screaming that you were inside, that we had to save you. But I wasn't there, Ethan whispered, the pieces of the puzzle fitting together in a terrifying way. No, you weren't. But at that moment I believed Gavin. I tried to get into the house to save you, and that's when I got burned. Constance saw me and pulled me away from the flames. Constance approached the bed. That's when I understood that Gavin had planned everything. He knew his father wasn't home, knew Ethan wasn't there either. But he feigned desperation to confuse anyone who might have seen something. He burned the house, on purpose to force the sale of the land, Ethan concluded, feeling nauseous. Benedict found that out a few days later, while he was recovering here with me, Constance continued. Gavin came to visit him and confessed everything, crying, begging for forgiveness. He said he didn't know the fire would spread so fast, that he thought he could control it. And what did Dad do? I forgave him, Benedict said simply. He was my son, Ethan. Even not by blood, Gavin was always my son. I couldn't turn him over to the police. Even not by blood, Ethan frowned. Benedict and Constance exchanged another loaded glance. Gavin was informally adopted by your mother and me when he was 6. His parents had died in an accident, and your mother, Delia, couldn't bear to see the child on the street. But we never made the adoption official. Gavin always knew that, and I think it created an insecurity in him, a constant need to prove he deserved to be part of the family. Is that why you hid here? To protect Gavin? To protect you both, Benedict corrected. I knew that if the truth came out, Gavin would be arrested, and you would carry the guilt of seeing your brother punished. I thought it would be better for you to believe I was gone. That way, Gavin could start over, and you wouldn't have to carry that burden. Ethan abruptly stood up from the chair, walking to the small window of the room. His mind was reeling with anger, sadness, and confusion. 2 years of his life had been based on a lie. 2 years suffering for a loss that hadn't happened, while his father lived in hiding to protect the very brother who had caused all that destruction. And Gavin, what happened to him after? He sold the land, Constance answered. Used fake documents, saying he was the only living heir. With the money, he paid off the debts and moved to Chicago. But I know things didn't get better for him. What do you mean? Lily, Benedict called out, tell Ethan what you saw last week. The girl climbed back onto the chair, her large eyes fixed on Ethan. I saw Uncle Gavin nearby. He was thin and sad, talking to himself. Grandma Constance said he was sick because he gambled all his money. Gavin is addicted to online gambling, Constance explained. The debts he paid off with the sale of the land were just the beginning. His problem is deeper than we imagined. Ethan felt as if the floor was disappearing from under his feet. Not only was his father alive, not only had he lived for 2 years believing a lie, but he now discovered that his brother had become an addict who had destroyed the family to support a self-destructive habit. Does he know you're alive? He asked his father. He knows. He visits twice a month, always at night, always in secret. He still asks for forgiveness, still promises he'll get better. Benedict sighed deeply. But with every visit, he's worse. Just then, as if summoned by the conversation, the sound of footsteps in the hallway made everyone freeze. Constance glanced at the clock on the wall. 7:30 at night. He's here, she whispered. From outside the house, Gavin's familiar voice called out, Constance, I came to see how Dad is. Ethan looked at Benedict, who had paled in the bed. In a few seconds, he would come face to face with the brother who had destroyed their lives without Gavin knowing. The truth had been revealed. Constance made a desperate gesture for Ethan to hide behind the bedroom door, but he shook his head. 2 years of suffering, 2 years of grieving a lie. He would hide no more. Lily, sensing the tension in the air, clung to Constance's skirt like a child feeling a storm approaching. Constance, the door is open. Gavin's voice echoed down the hall. Can I come in? Come in, my son, Constance replied with a trembling voice, giving Ethan one last pleading look. Gavin appeared at the bedroom door, and time seemed to stop. At 39, he was noticeably thinner than the last time Ethan had seen him, his clothes hanging loosely on his frame, and there was a sickly pallor to his face. But it was the shock in his eyes upon seeing his older brother that filled the room with an almost palpable tension. Ethan, the word escaped Gavin's mouth like a groan. What? How? Hello, Gavin, Ethan said, his voice controlled but loaded with a coldness his brother had never heard before. I came to visit our father, our living father. Gavin staggered as if he'd been punched, holding onto the doorframe. His face went through a rapid sequence of emotions: shock, terror, guilt, and finally, a sort of desperate relief. Ethan, I can explain, he began, but the words died in his throat when he saw the expression on his brother's face. Explain. Ethan stood up slowly, all the pain and anger of the past 2 years concentrating in his voice. Explain how you burned down the family home. Explain how you let me believe our father had died. Explain how you forged documents to sell the land that wasn't yours. I never wanted things to get to this point. Gavin entered the room with hesitant steps, his hands trembling visibly. The debts, Ethan. You don't understand the kind of people I got involved with. Then explain it to me, Ethan said, crossing his arms. Explain to me how my brother became a liar, a forger, someone capable of burning down his own family's house. Benedict tried to sit up better in bed, his weak voice intervening. Boys, please. No, Dad. Ethan turned to his father. 2 years, Dad. For 2 years I carried the pain of having lost you. For 2 years I blame myself for not getting there in time to save you. For 2 years, Gavin consoled me, hugged me at your funeral, pretended to cry for your loss alongside me. Gavin sank into the only available chair in the room, burying his face in his hands. I did cry, Ethan. Every single day of these 2 years has been hell for me. Every time I saw you suffering, every time you talked about missing Dad. But not enough to tell the truth, Ethan retorted. I tried. I tried several times, but how? How was I supposed to come to you and say, hey, Ethan, I burned down, and our house, faked our father's death, forged documents to sell the land, all to pay off gambling debts? The raw confession echoed through the small room like an explosion. Lily, who had remained quiet until then, let go of Constance's skirt and approached Gavin. Uncle Gavin, why did you do that? She asked with her devastating innocence. Why did you hurt your family? Gavin looked at the little girl, tears streaming freely down his face. Because I'm weak, little one. Because when things got hard, instead of asking for help, I chose the easy way out. And the easy way out always turned out to be the most destructive. Were the debts really that big? Ethan asked, his curiosity momentarily overcoming his anger. $200,000, Gavin murmured. I started betting small amounts online just for fun. Then it became an escape when I lost my job. Then it became an obsession when I started winning a few times. And before I knew it, I was in debt to loan sharks who knew where you lived, where your bakeries were. Ethan felt a chill. Did they really threaten to hurt me? Not directly, but they made it very clear. They knew about you, about your success, and I knew that if I didn't pay, they would go after any source of money they could find in the family. Constance, who had remained silent, observing the painful reunion between the brothers, finally spoke up. Gavin, tell him what happened after you sold the land. Gavin hesitated, clearly reluctant to reveal more sordid details of his life. I paid off the debts, all of them. For 3 months, I felt free. I got a job at an accounting firm in Chicago, rented a small but decent apartment. And then, Ethan pressed, and then I started gambling again. The confession came out as a whisper. I thought now that I was free of the old debts, I could control it. I thought I had learned my lesson, but it was worse than before. How much do you owe now? Ethan asked, though he already feared the answer. $350,000, Gavin said, his voice almost inaudible. And this time I have nothing to sell. I lost my job last week. I'm getting evicted from my apartment at the end of the month. The silence that followed was as heavy as lead. Benedict from the bed watched his 2 sons with an expression of deep pain. Ethan processed the magnitude of the trouble his brother had gotten himself into again. And the creditors? Ethan asked. They know about you, Gavin replied, raising his eyes to meet his brother's. They know that Ethan Caldwell, owner of the bakery chain, is my brother. They've already made some insinuations about your properties being good collateral. Ethan felt the anger returning, now mixed with genuine concern. Not only had Gavin destroyed the family once, but he had created a situation where they were all in danger again. Do you understand what you've done, Gavin? Ethan said, his voice low but filled with fury. It wasn't enough to burn our house. It wasn't enough to make us believe Dad was dead. It wasn't enough to illegally sell the family land. Now you've put all of us in the crosshairs of loan sharks again. I know, and I can't stop, Gavin exploded, getting up from the chair. Do you think I want to live like this? Do you think I wake up every day happy to have become this? Every night I come here to ask Dad for forgiveness. Every night I promise I'm going to stop, that I'm going to fix things. Promises don't fix anything, Ethan shot back. 2 years of empty promises while I suffered the loss of my father. Lily, frightened by the shouting, began to cry softly. Constance picked her up, trying to comfort her, while Benedict made an effort to sit up completely in bed. Enough, the old man said with surprising firmness. Enough, Fighting! Enough shouting! We've already lost 2 years because of past mistakes. We're not going to waste any more time with accusations. Dad, you don't understand, Ethan began. I understand perfectly, Benedict interrupted. I understand that Gavin made terrible mistakes. I understand that you have every right to be furious. But I also understand that we are a family, and families don't abandon each other, even when everything seems lost. Gavin looked at his father with a mixture of gratitude and shame. Dad, I don't deserve. It's not about deserving, Benedict said. It's about choosing what we do from now on. We can let the past destroy us completely, or we can find a way to move forward together. Ethan looked around the small room. His frail father in bed, his addicted brother destroyed by guilt, an innocent child frightened by the shouts, an elderly woman who had sacrificed 2 years of her life caring for a secret that wasn't hers to keep. And he realized that despite all the pain and betrayal, they were still his family, the only family he had. 3 weeks had passed since the tense reunion at Constance's house. Ethan had returned daily, dividing his time between managing his bakeries and trying to rebuild his relationship with his father. Benedict had good days and bad days. Sometimes he recognized his son immediately, other times he confused him with people from the past. But Lily remained the key to awakening moments of lucidity in the old man. Gavin had disappeared after the confrontation, leaving only a note apologizing and promising to find a solution that wouldn't involve anyone else in his problems. Ethan knew this was just another escape for his brother, but a part of him was relieved not to have to deal with the daily presence of the betrayal. That Thursday morning, Ethan arrived at Constance's house and found Lily playing alone in the small yard. The girl had developed a habit of asking questions that led to the most important truths. "Uncle Ethan," she said, running to hug his legs, "Grandpa Benedict is acting strange today." "Strange how?" "He woke up asking about a safe. He said he has to tell you something very important before he forgets again." Ethan felt a chill down his spine. In recent days, he had noticed that his father's moments of lucidity were accompanied by a growing urgency, as if he were fighting against time to reveal something crucial. Inside the house, he found Constance preparing tea in the kitchen, a worried expression on her face. "He's been agitated since he woke up," she said, "talking about something he hid in the yard of the old house. I tried to calm him down, but he insists he needs to talk to you." Ethan went to the room where Benedict was waiting for him, sitting on the edge of the bed, more alert than he had been in weeks. "Ethan, finally. I need to tell you about the safe." "What safe, Dad?" "Before the fire, I had saved money in a safe buried in the yard of our house. It was meant to be an inheritance for both of you." Benedict's eyes shone with surprising clarity. $400,000, son. Money I saved for years from sales of smaller plots of land I made over my life. Ethan sat down heavily in the chair next to the bed. $400,000 buried in the yard? Yes, I was saving it for when you needed it, for when I wasn't here anymore to help you. I never told you because I wanted it to be a surprise, a final gift from your father. But Dad, the house was destroyed, the land was sold, even if the safe is still there. Who was the land sold to? Benedict interrupted. Gavin never told me the buyer's name. Benedict held his son's hand with surprising strength. You need to find out, Ethan. That money could solve Gavin's problems and still have some left over for us to rebuild our lives. That same day, Ethan decided to investigate the sale of the land. He went to the Crestwood County Recorder's office, where he discovered the property had been sold to Morris Shaw, a local businessman who built supermarkets in the region. The name was vaguely familiar. Morris Shaw had a controversial reputation in town. He was known for buying land under questionable conditions and quickly turning it into commercial developments. Ethan decided to talk to him directly. Morris's office was in a commercial building downtown. The businessman, a 50-year-old man with a prominent belly and a fake smile, received Ethan with an exaggerated cordiality that immediately aroused suspicion. Ethan Caldwell, the owner of the most famous bakeries in town. How can I help you? Mr. Shaw, I came to talk about a piece of land you bought 2 years ago. It belonged to my family. Morris's smile faltered slightly. Ah, yes, the property on Flower Street. A very sad transaction, I remember. Your brother approached me after the fire that killed your father. My father didn't die in the fire, Ethan said coldly, watching Morris's reaction. To his surprise, the businessman showed no shock at all, just a slight twitch in his eyes that revealed more than he intended. He didn't die? Morris said, but his voice sounded rehearsed. What? What good news? You don't seem surprised. Well, Of course I'm surprised. It's just, well, business is business, isn't it? The land was purchased legally. I'd like to make a buyback offer, Ethan said, deciding to get straight to the point. Impossible, Morris replied too quickly. I've already started construction on the supermarket. Investments have been made, projects approved. It would be unfeasible to reverse everything now. Not even for a price well above what you paid. Not even for 10 times the price, Morris said with growing firmness. The answer is no. Ethan left the office with more questions than answers. There was something about Morris's reaction that didn't add up. The man knew more about the situation than he was admitting. That afternoon, back at Constance's house, he found Lily playing in the yard with some drawings spread on the ground. The girl had developed a habit of drawing whenever she was worried, and her recent drawings showed burned houses and sad people. Lily, can I ask you something? You can, Uncle Ethan. Do you remember anything about the house that burned down? You were very little, but sometimes children remember things that adults forget. Lily stopped drawing and looked at him with her big, serious eyes. I remember the fat man. What fat man? The fat man who was talking to Uncle Gavin before. The house caught fire. They were arguing outside. Ethan's heart sped up. Can you describe this man? He was fat, had little hair, and laughed very loudly. Uncle Gavin gave him money. The description perfectly matched Morris Shaw. Ethan felt the pieces starting to fit together in a disturbing way. Lily, where were you when you saw this? At Grandma's house. I was playing by the window and I saw them talking on the street. And after? Then Uncle Gavin went into the house. The fat man left, then the smoke started. Ethan realized he was uncovering something much bigger than he had imagined. Gavin hadn't just burned the house out of desperation. He had planned it all with Morris Shaw. The businessman wasn't just the buyer of the land. He was a partner in the scheme from the beginning. That night, Ethan confronted this new reality. His brother had not only betrayed the family, he had conspired with a stranger to destroy their family assets and split the profits. The betrayal was even deeper than he had imagined. But now he had a weapon. He knew where the buried safe was. He knew Morris Shaw was involved in the fraud from the start. And he knew the businessman was desperately trying to hide something. When Constance put Lily to bed and Benedict fell asleep after another day of intermittent lucidity, Ethan made a decision. He wasn't just going to try to buy back the land. He was going to find out exactly what Morris Shaw and Gavin had planned together and use it to recover not only the buried safe, but also his family's dignity. The game had changed. Now he was no longer just a victim of circumstances. He was someone with information powerful enough to turn the tables in his favor. The next morning, Ethan woke up with a plan. He needed more information about the connection between Gavin and Morris Shaw, and he knew exactly who could help him. He sought out Anthony Fisher, a private investigator he had hired years ago to check the backgrounds of employees at his bakeries. Anthony was a discreet 60-year-old man, retired from the police force, who kept a small office on a side street in downtown Crestwood. When Ethan explained the situation, the investigator whistled softly. "Morris Shaw. That name has crossed my desk a few times. Nothing that could be proven, but there are always rumors about questionable practices in his land acquisitions." "What kind of practices?" "Buying properties in family crisis situations, always paying below market values. There are suspicions that he has contacts who inform him about families going through financial difficulties or personal tragedies." Ethan felt a cold anger growing in his chest, as if he knew in advance when someone would be desperate to sell. "Exactly. I'll investigate his connection with your brother. Give me 48 hours. While waiting for the investigation results, Ethan turned his attention to Benedict. His father had had a restless night, and Constance was clearly worried about his condition. "He woke up shouting about documents," she explained. "Said Gavin took important papers from the house before the fire." "What kind of documents?" "I couldn't quite understand. He mixes up the present and past when he gets like this, but he mentioned something about proof that Gavin hid." Ethan found his father sitting on the small porch of the house, watching Lily play in the yard. The girl had become a source of tranquility for Benedict in his moments of mental confusion. "Dad, Constance said you remembered some documents." Benedict turned to him, with eyes that alternated between clarity and fog. "Ethan, or are you Gavin?" "It's me, Ethan." "Ah, my eldest son, always responsible." Benedict smiled faintly. "Gavin took the blue folder on the night of the fire. He said it was to protect our papers from the fire, but what, Dad?" "But he took it before the fire started. I saw him through the window when he left the house carrying the folder." Ethan felt another piece of the puzzle click into place. What was in that folder? Family documents, old deeds, certificates, contracts. Benedict paused, struggling to remember. "And the adoption record." "Adoption record?" "Gavin's. Your mother always wanted to make the adoption official, but I always postponed it, said it wasn't necessary, that he was already our son in our hearts." Benedict's voice trembled. "If I had done the papers, maybe he wouldn't have felt so insecure about his place in the family." This revelation hit Ethan with unexpected force. Gavin had grown up knowing he wasn't officially part of the family, carrying the insecurity of potentially being abandoned at any moment. This explained a lot about his constant need for approval and his willingness to make drastic decisions when he felt threatened. Just then, Ethan's phone rang. It was Anthony Fisher. "Ethan, you need to come to my office. What I've found is more serious than we imagined." Half an hour later, Ethan was sitting before the investigator, looking at photos and documents spread across the table. "Morris Shaw didn't just know your brother before the land sale," Anthony began. "They met at a gambling house in Chicago, 6 months before the fire." "A gambling house?" "Morris Shaw isn't just a businessman. He's a silent partner in 3 gambling houses in the region. That's where he met Gavin and found out about his debts." Ethan picked up one of the photos that showed Gavin and Morris talking at a poker table, so it was Morris who led Gavin to addiction. Worse than that, Morris systematically encouraged Gavin's gambling, offering easy credit, making him believe he could win back the lost money, and when the debts became unpayable, he offered a solution. The house fire. Exactly. Morris suggested that Gavin stage an accident to justify a quick sale of the land. He already had contacts at the recorder's office to speed up the paperwork, already knew how to bypass the legal issues. Ethan felt nausea rising in his throat. His brother hadn't just made a desperate mistake. He had been manipulated by a predator who specialized in exploiting vulnerable people. "There's more," Anthony continued. Morris has done this before. I found at least 4 similar cases in the last 5 years. Families in crisis, people with addictions, convenient accidents that resulted in land sales to him at ridiculously low prices. How did he not get caught? Because technically he didn't do anything illegal. The people really sold the properties, really signed the documents. He just took advantage of moments of extreme vulnerability. Ethan picked up another document from the table. It was a copy of the sales contract for his family's land. The price he paid, 30% of the market value. And look here, Anthony pointed to a specific clause. Morris included a clause prohibiting any kind of excavation on the land for the next 10 years, under penalty of a $100,000 fine. He knows about the safe. He definitely knows. Gavin must have told him during the negotiations. Morris legally protected himself against any attempt to recover what's buried there. Ethan left the investigator's office with a completely new understanding of the situation. His brother had been a victim as much as an agent of destruction. Morris Shaw was the true villain of the story, a predator who specialized in destroying families to profit from the wreckage. But now he had evidence. He had proof of the manipulation, of the pattern of predatory behavior, of the connection between Morris and Gavin's addiction. The question was how to use this information to get the land back and expose Morris without putting Gavin in prison. When he arrived at Constance's house that afternoon, he found a scene that surprised him. Lily was sitting next to Benedict on the porch, and both were looking at a thin, gaunt man who was slowly approaching the house. It was Gavin. After 3 weeks of being missing, he was back. But his condition was shocking. He had lost more weight. His clothes were dirty and wrinkled, and there was an expression of absolute despair in his eyes. When he saw Ethan, he stopped in the middle of the yard as if he'd been shot. "Ethan, I didn't know you were here." "Where have you been, Gavin?" "Trying to sort things out, trying to find a way out that didn't involve you all." Gavin approached hesitantly. "But things got worse, much worse." "What do you mean, worse?" "Morris Shaw. He isn't just the buyer of the land. He's the owner of my debts now. He bought my debts from the original loan sharks." Ethan felt as if he'd been struck by lightning. Morris hadn't just manipulated Gavin to get the land. Now he completely controlled his brother's life through the debts. "What does he want?" "He wants me to forge documents for other families. He wants me to help him get more land using the same methods we used with our house." Gavin collapsed into a porch chair. "And if I refuse, he'll expose everything we did. He'll turn me over to the police and still collect the debts from you." Lily, who had been listening to everything in silence, approached Gavin and took his hand. "Uncle Gavin, why don't you tell everyone that the fat man is mean?" The girl's innocent question echoed in the air like a revelation. Ethan looked at his shattered brother, his frail father, the child wise beyond her years, and understood that the time had come to stop being a victim of circumstances. It was time to fight back. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep and Benedict was resting after an emotional day, the 3 adults gathered in the small living room of Constance's house. Gavin had taken a shower and put on clean, borrowed clothes, but his appearance still reflected months of physical and mental deterioration. "I need to understand exactly how Morris Shaw has control over your debts," Ethan said, sitting across from his brother. "He bought all my debts a month ago," Gavin explained, avoiding eye contact. "The original loan sharks were getting impatient, threatening. More drastic measures. Morris showed up like a savior, offering to pay everything off in exchange for services." "What kind of services?" "Identifying vulnerable families, forging documents when necessary, creating situations that justify quick property sales." Gavin's voice was almost a whisper. "He has a whole scheme set up, Ethan. I would just be another cog in the machine." Constance, who had remained silent, finally spoke up. Gavin, do you understand that if you agree to work for this man, other families will suffer what ours did? I know! You think I don't know? Gavin exploded, getting up from his chair. But what's the alternative? If I refuse, he turns me over to the police for forgery and fraud, and he still collects the debts from Ethan, because he knows Ethan will pay to protect the family. There's a third option, Ethan said calmly, which is? We expose him first. Gavin laughed bitterly. With what evidence? Morris is smart. He never leaves a trail that could incriminate him. Everything he does is technically legal. Anthony Fisher has already found patterns, other families, other suspicious situations, and now we have you willing to testify about his methods. Testify and go to jail with him, Gavin retorted. Not necessarily, interrupted a voice from the door. Everyone turned to see Anthony Fisher entering the house, invited by Ethan earlier for the evening meeting. Anthony, Ethan asked. I spent the afternoon researching legal precedents. If Gavin cooperates with a formal investigation showing how he was manipulated by Morris Shaw, there's a good chance he could get a plea deal. What does that mean? Asked Constance. It means Gavin would admit his crimes, but in exchange for information that helps dismantle Morris's larger scheme, he would receive a reduced or alternative sentence. And if it doesn't work, Gavin asked, then you go to prison anyway, Anthony replied with brutal frankness. The difference is that as things stand, Morris gets to keep destroying families, and you become his slave for the rest of your life. The silence that followed was heavy. Gavin paced back and forth in the small living room, clearly struggling with the decision. Ethan watched his brother, noticing for the first time in years that Gavin seemed genuinely remorseful, not just afraid of the consequences. There's something else you need to know, Gavin said finally. Morris isn't just after our land. He has information about other properties in town that he wants to acquire. What properties? The Oliveira farm, where the son had that motorcycle accident last year, the home of the widow Silva, who recently lost her husband, the Mendonca's place, where the father is hospitalized with heart problems. Gavin stopped pacing. Morris gave me a list of 12 properties he considers opportunities. 12 families he plans to destroy, Constance murmured, horrified. And he wants me to be the one responsible for creating the situations that force these sales, Gavin continued. Accidental fires, gas leaks, structural problems that require demolition. He has a whole methodology. Ethan felt a cold fury rising in his chest. Morris Shaw wasn't just an opportunist. He was a systematic predator planning to destroy a dozen families to profit from their wreckage. Where is this list? Anthony asked. Morris gave me a copy yesterday. It's in my pocket. Gavin pulled out a folded paper, handing it to the investigator. Anthony examined the list, whistling softly. This right here is enough evidence to charge Morris Shaw with conspiracy, attempted fraud and racketeering. But if I hand over this list, Morris will know it was me, Gavin protested. Morris already knows. You're a weak link, Ethan said. Why do you think he's pressuring you so much? He knows he can't trust you in the long run. At that moment, a sound from Benedict's room interrupted the conversation. Constance rushed to check, returning minutes later with a worried expression. He's having a crisis. He's talking about hidden documents, about proof that Gavin has. Everyone went to the room where Benedict was sitting up in bed, visibly agitated. The blue folder, he said repeatedly. Gavin, did you bring the blue folder? Gavin approached the bed hesitantly. Dad, what blue folder? The folder with the family documents. You took it on the night of the fire, remember? You said you were going to protect them from the fire. Gavin turned pale. I still have some of those documents. What documents? Ethan pressed. Certificates, old contracts, and Dad's will. What will? Ethan and Constance asked simultaneously. Benedict, despite his mental confusion, managed to answer. The will I made when your mother passed, leaving everything divided equally between you two, but with a special clause." "What clause?" asked Anthony, sensing the legal importance of the moment. "If either of my sons tried to harm the other or the family, he would automatically lose his right to the inheritance," Benedict said, his voice gaining momentary clarity. The silence in the room was absolute. Gavin had just discovered that by burning the house and forging the sale of the land, he had technically forfeited all rights to the family inheritance. "That means," Gavin began. "It means the sale of the land was illegal from the start," Anthony concluded. Gavin had no legal right to sell the property because he had lost his share of the inheritance the moment he committed fraud against the family. "But to use that in court, we'd need to prove Gavin actually committed fraud," Ethan said. "Which brings us back to the question of his cooperation with the authorities," Anthony said. Gavin looked around the room, at the father he had betrayed, the brother he had deceived, the woman who had cared for the wreckage of his destruction, the investigator who was offering a chance at redemption. "If I cooperate," he asked, "if I turn in Maurice Shaw and help dismantle his scheme, will it reverse the damage I caused our family?" "It won't bring back the 2 lost years," Ethan said, honestly. "But it might stop other families from going through what we went through, and it could be the first step for you to build a new, clean life." "And the safe buried on the land. With the will and the evidence against Maurice, we have a real chance of reversing the sale and recovering what's ours," Anthony replied. Gavin closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and made the decision that would change everything. "I'll cooperate. I'll turn in Maurice Shaw and face the consequences of my actions." For the first time in years, Ethan saw something in his brother's face that he had forgotten existed: genuine courage. Gavin's decision to cooperate with the authorities triggered a series of events that moved with surprising speed. Anthony Fisher had contacted the local district attorney, DA Richard Almeida, who showed immediate interest in the case as soon as he saw the compiled evidence. On Monday morning, a week after the meeting at Constance's house, Gavin voluntarily presented himself at the district attorney's office. Ethan accompanied him, not as emotional support, but because DA Almeida requested his presence as a witness to the damages caused to the family. "Mr. Gavin," said DA Almeida, a man in his 40s with glasses and a serious demeanor, "I understand you're willing to cooperate with our investigation into the practices of Maurice Shaw." "Yes, sir. I want to tell you everything I know about how he operates. Before we begin, I need to make it clear that your cooperation does not guarantee immunity. You have committed serious crimes and will face consequences. What we are offering is the possibility of a reduced sentence in exchange for information that helps us dismantle a larger scheme." Gavin nodded, his hands trembling slightly. "I understand. I'd rather face the consequences of my actions than continue to be manipulated by Maurice Shaw." For the next 3 hours, Gavin detailed how he met Maurice, how he was gradually led into a gambling addiction, how Maurice suggested burning the house as a solution to his debts, and finally, how he was coerced into becoming part of the fraudulent land acquisition scheme. DA Almeida recorded every word, asked specific questions about dates, amounts, methods used, and especially about the list of 12 properties Maurice intended to acquire. "This list is crucial evidence," the prosecutor said, examining the paper. "It shows premeditation and planning of multiple frauds. With this, we can obtain search and seizure warrants." "How long until Maurice is arrested?" Ethan asked. "We need to move carefully. Maurice Shaw is an influential man in town with good lawyers. We'll need irrefutable evidence before we act." That afternoon, while Gavin remained at the DA's office to continue his testimony, Ethan returned to Constance's house. He found Lily playing in the yard, drawing birds in flight on a large sheet of paper. "Uncle Ethan," she said, running to hug him, "Grandpa Benedict was talking about you today. He remembered when you were little." "What did he remember?" "That you always took care of Uncle Gavin when he was sad. He said you were like a real big brother." The girl's words touched Ethan deeply. Despite all the betrayal and pain, there had been good times between the brothers that he had forgotten in the bitterness of the last few years. Inside the house, he found Benedict sitting on the porch, more lucid than he had been in days. "Ethan, how did it go with Gavin today?" "He's cooperating with the authorities, Dad, telling them everything about Morris Shaw." "I'm proud of him," Benedict said, surprising. "His son. I know he made terrible mistakes, but admitting your mistakes and trying to fix them, that shows character." "You're not angry with him?" "Of course I am. But I also understand that he was manipulated by someone much more experienced at hurting people." Benedict held his son's hand. "Morris Shaw took advantage of Gavin's insecurities, his desperation. That doesn't excuse what Gavin did, but it explains it." That evening, Ethan received an unexpected call. It was D.A. Almeida. "Ethan, we need to talk urgently. Something has happened with Gavin's testimony." "What was it?" "I'd rather explain in person. Can you come to my office now?" 20 minutes later, Ethan was sitting before the prosecutor, who seemed visibly shaken. "Ethan, during this afternoon's testimony, we discovered something that completely changes the landscape of the case." "What?" "Gavin told us about other documents that Morris Shaw possesses, documents he obtained through blackmail and coercion of other victims." "What kind of documents?" "Fake contracts, forged wills, fraudulent death certificates." D.A. Almeida paused. "And a fake death certificate for your father, dated the night of the fire." Ethan felt as if he had been struck by lightning. A fake death certificate? Morris Shaw didn't just plan the land fraud. He planned to make your father completely disappear from a legal standpoint to ensure he could never contest the sale. It means that legally, your father has been dead for 2 years. He cannot own property, cannot enter into contracts, cannot even receive proper medical treatment. The magnitude of the discovery left Ethan in shock. Morris Shaw had literally erased his father's legal existence as part of the fraud scheme. How do we reverse this? We'll need a complex legal process to prove that Benedict Caldwell is alive and that the death certificate is fraudulent. This could take months. And in the meantime, Morris Shaw is still legally the owner of the land where your family's safe is buried. Ethan left the prosecutor's office with a new and terrifying understanding of Morris Shaw's cruelty. He had not only manipulated Gavin to destroy the family, he had planned to completely erase their father's existence. When he arrived at Constance's house that night, he found a scene that surprised him. Gavin was back, sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, looking more serene than he had in months. "How was the rest of the testimony?" Ethan asked. "Long, painful, but necessary," Gavin replied. "I told them everything, Ethan. Every sordid detail of what I did, what Morris made me do, the plans he has for other families. D.A. Almeida told me about Dad's fake death certificate." Gavin's face contorted with pain. "That was the hardest part to tell, seeing how Morris planned not just to rob us, but to completely erase our father's existence. It made me understand the kind of monster I was dealing with." "Did you know about this from the beginning?" "No, Morris only told me after the sale was finalized. He said it was a precautionary measure to ensure there would be no future challenges." Gavin covered his face with his hands. "By the time I understood what he had done, it was too late to go back." Constance, who had remained silent, finally spoke up. "Gavin, you understand that I didn't take care of your father all these years just out of charity. I took care of him because I believed that one day you would reconcile, that you would find a way to be a family again. I know, Constance, and I'm grateful for it every day." "Then promise me," she said, looking directly into his eyes, "that you will never again allow someone to manipulate you against your own family." "I promise," Gavin said, his voice thick with genuine emotion. Just then, Lily appeared in the kitchen, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Why is everyone awake?" she asked. "We're talking about how to fix the things that were broken," Ethan explained, picking the girl up. "And are you going to be able to fix them?" Ethan looked at his brother, at Constance, and thought of his father sleeping in the next room, a man who legally didn't exist, but who had been the center around which this whole struggle revolved. "We're going to try, Lily. We're going to try very hard." But even as he spoke, Ethan knew the battle was far from over. Morris Shaw still controlled the land, still possessed forged documents, and now knew he was being investigated. A desperate man was capable of anything to protect his secrets. The war had just begun. Morris Shaw's response to the investigation came faster than anyone expected. On Wednesday morning, Ethan woke up to a frantic call from his manager at the Central Bakery. "Mr. Ethan, the health department is here. They arrived with a closure order. They say they received anonymous tips about inadequate hygiene conditions." Ethan dressed quickly and rushed to the bakery, where he found 3 health department employees searching every corner of the establishment. The team leader, a thin, middle-aged man, showed him the official order. "Mr. Caldwell, we've received serious complaints about improper food storage, pests, and violations of health codes. I need you to halt all operations until a full investigation is conducted." "That's impossible," Ethan protested. "My bakeries have passed all regular inspections. We have up-to-date certifications." "The complaints are very specific," the official replied, consulting his papers. "They include photos and videos showing serious irregularities." Ethan knew immediately who was behind this. Morris Shaw had found out about Gavin's cooperation and was retaliating in the only way he could directly hit Ethan, through his businesses. Within 2 hours, all 5 of Ethan's bakeries were simultaneously shut down, with orders that could keep them closed for weeks while the investigations proceeded. Dozens of employees were sent home, suppliers cancelled contracts, and the revenue that supported not only Ethan but also helped with Benedict's care simply vanished. Overnight, when Ethan arrived at Constance's house that afternoon, he carried the weight of watching his business empire crumble. He found Gavin waiting for him on the porch, a look of deep guilt on his face. "Ethan, I heard about the bakeries. D.A. Almeida called me. This is retaliation from Morris." "Of course it's retaliation," Ethan replied, collapsing into a chair. "And it's working. With the bakeries closed, I can't pay lawyers. I can't sustain the investigation. I can't take care of Dad." "There's something else," Gavin said hesitantly. "Morris called me today." "He called you?" "He offered a deal. If I withdraw my cooperation with the district attorney and convince you to drop the investigation, he'll reverse the complaints against your bakeries." Ethan looked at his brother with a mixture of anger and despair. "And you're considering it?" "No," Gavin replied immediately, "but I understand the pressure he's putting on you. Morris knows that if he destroys your businesses, you won't have the resources to fight him." At that moment, Constance came out of the house with a worried expression. "Ethan, you need to see your father. He's been very agitated since he heard about the bakeries." Inside the room, Benedict was sitting on the edge of the bed, more lucid than he had been in weeks, but visibly disturbed. "Ethan, my son, I heard your bakeries were closed because of the problems we created." "These aren't problems you created, Dad. It's Morris Shaw trying to silence us. But it started with our mistakes, with Gavin's mistakes, with my weakness in protecting him instead of doing what was right." Benedict held his son's hands. I can't let you lose everything you've built because of us." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time we give up this fight. Maurice Shaw has won. He has the land, he has the safe, he has forged documents that protect him, and now he has the power to destroy your life too." The suggestion of surrender from his own father hit Ethan like a stab wound. After weeks of fighting to reclaim his family and justice, hearing that the man he was fighting for considered defeat acceptable was devastating. "No," Ethan said firmly, "we're not giving up." "Ethan, be rational. The bakeries can be reopened, fake documents can be exposed, stolen land can be recovered." Ethan stood up, feeling a determination he hadn't experienced in years. "But if we give up now, Maurice Shaw will destroy 12 other families. Other children like Lily will grow up without parents. Other people like you will be legally erased from existence." Just then, Lily entered the room, carrying one of her drawings. It was a picture of the family gathered in front of one of Ethan's bakeries, but with a striking difference. In the drawing, Maurice Shaw appeared behind them like a dark shadow. "Uncle Ethan," she said, "I drew the bad man trying to scare us, but look." She pointed to the drawing. "The family is holding hands in front of him. He can't separate us if we're together." The simplicity of the 4-year-old's observation echoed in the room like a revelation. Ethan looked at his father, at his brother who had appeared in the doorway, at Constance who had cared for them all, and realized Lily was right. "Dad," he said, "Maurice Shaw is counting on our division, on our fear, on our tendency to protect ourselves individually instead of fighting as a family. But the bakeries are just businesses. This family, our dignity, our chance to prevent other people from suffering what we have suffered. That's what really matters." Gavin approached the bed. "Ethan is right, Dad. If we back down now, Maurice will know he can destroy anyone who opposes him, and he'll use that against other families." Constance nodded. "I took care of Benedict these 2 years, not just out of love for family, but because I believed that one day the truth would come out. We can't stop now when we're so close." Benedict looked around the room, seeing the people he had helped bring together through his suffering, and slowly nodded. "Then we keep fighting. But how? Maurice has resources, influence, forged documents. And we have the truth," said a voice from the door. Everyone turned to see Anthony Fisher entering the room carrying a bulky folder. "Anthony," Ethan asked, "I thought you were investigating the complaints against the bakeries." "I was, and I found something interesting." Anthony opened the folder, revealing photographs and documents. "The photos used to justify the closure of your bakeries were taken in other establishments. Maurice Shaw falsified evidence." "How did you find out?" "One of the photos showed a date label that didn't match any product your bakeries sell. I traced its origin and found that the image was taken in a bankrupt bakery in Chicago 3 months ago." "That proves he forged the complaints." "Not only that, I managed to identify who took the photos for Maurice. A corrupt employee from the health department itself, who had already been investigated for accepting bribes in other cases." Gavin stepped forward. "Does this mean we can reverse the closure?" "More than that," Anthony said with a smile. "It means we have Maurice Shaw red-handed for falsifying evidence and bribing a public official. DA Almeida can use this to get immediate search warrants." The atmosphere in the room changed completely. What had seemed like a crushing defeat had turned into an opportunity for a counterattack. "How long have you known this?" Ethan asked. "I found out 2 hours ago. I came straight here because I wanted the family to know before we informed DA Almeida." Lily, who had listened to the whole conversation with surprising attention for her age, held Ethan's hand. "Uncle Ethan, does this mean we're going to beat the bad man?" Ethan looked at the girl, at the family gathered around his father's bed, and felt for the first time in months that victory was possible. It means we have a real chance of winning, Lily. A real chance. The operation, coordinated by the district attorney's office, took place on Friday morning. DA Almeida had worked through the night with judges to obtain the necessary warrants, and at 6 in the morning, simultaneous teams knocked on the doors of Morris Shaw's office, his residence, and the 3 gambling houses where he was a silent partner. Ethan accompanied the search of the office, authorized to be present as a representative of the aggrieved family. What they found exceeded all expectations. Morris Shaw kept a meticulous file on his victims, folders organized by family containing detailed personal information, points of vulnerability, manipulation strategies, and ready-to-use forged documents. It was a systematic catalogue of family destruction. "My God," DA Almeida murmured, examining one of the folders. "He has information on 63 different families." 63? Ethan asked, horrified. "Some have already been processed. Their properties have been acquired. Others are in different stages of manipulation." The prosecutor showed a folder marked "In Progress." 12 families he planned to target in the next 6 months. In the Caldwell family folder, Ethan found documents that made him sick. Morris had investigated his personal life in intimate detail, reports on his habits, routines, psychological weaknesses, and even information on how to manipulate Gavin through his addiction. But it was in a locked drawer that they discovered the most incriminating material: dozens of ready-to-use forged documents, including blank death certificates, pre-signed contracts, and counterfeit notary stamps. With this here, we can link Morris Shaw to at least 15 cases of document fraud, DA Almeida said. And look at this. The prosecutor showed a handwritten notebook where Morris had detailed his methods. It was almost a manual on how to identify vulnerable families, how to create crisis situations, and how to profit from others' desperation. On the page dedicated to the Caldwell family, there was a note that chilled Ethan's blood. "If Gavin fails to cooperate adequately with future operations, eliminate as a security risk." He was planning to get rid of Gavin, Ethan said, showing the note to DA Almeida. "Morris Shaw is more dangerous than we imagined. He's not just a fraudster, he's someone willing to take extreme measures to protect his schemes." While the office search continued, Anthony Fisher coordinated the operation at Morris's residence. There, they found a safe containing approximately $200,000 in cash, clearly profits from his fraudulent activities. But the most shocking discovery came from his home office: a computer containing email correspondence between Morris and corrupt employees at notary offices, the health department, and even some members of the local judiciary. "Ethan," Anthony called on the phone, "you need to come here. What we found on Morris's computer will shock you." An hour later, Ethan was at Morris Shaw's house, looking at emails that revealed a much larger web of corruption than they had imagined. "Look at this conversation," Anthony said, pointing to the screen. "Morris paid $15,000 to a clerk at the recorder's office to expedite the registration of your father's fake death certificate." "And this one," DA Almeida pointed to another email. $10,000 to the head of the health department to falsify the complaints against your bakeries." How many people are involved in his scheme? From what we see here, at least 12 public officials have received payments from Morris in the last 3 years, Anthony replied, but it was DA Almeida who found the most important piece of evidence: an email from Morris to a corrupt lawyer detailing exactly how they had planned the fraud of the Caldwell family home from the beginning. "Listen to this," the prosecutor said, reading the email aloud. "Gavin is desperate enough to accept any solution. I'll suggest the accidental fire as a way to justify a quick sale. I already have contacts at the recorder's office to speed up the paperwork. The father's death certificate will be processed as an additional precaution. Ethan felt a mixture of satisfaction and horror. Satisfaction because they finally had irrefutable evidence of Morris's systematic manipulation. Horror because he realized how deeply his family had been studied and exploited. "Where is Morris now?" he asked. "He fled," D.A. Almeida replied. "When we arrived at the office this morning, his employees said he had traveled on urgent business last night." "Did he know we were investigating?" "Probably. Men like Morris Shaw always have informants. But it doesn't matter. With this evidence, he can run wherever he wants. He'll be arrested as soon as he shows up." That afternoon, Ethan returned to Constance's house with news that changed everything. The family was gathered in the small living room. Benedict in his borrowed wheelchair, Gavin nervous but hopeful, Constance preparing tea, and Lily drawing at her low table. "We found everything," Ethan announced. "Forged documents, evidence of corruption, proof that Morris planned our destruction from day one." "Does that mean we'll get the land back?" Gavin asked. "More than that. D.A. Almeida said that with the evidence we have, not only will we get our land back, but Morris will be forced to return all the properties he acquired fraudulently." "And the other families?" asked Constance. "All who were harmed will have their properties restored, and Morris will reimburse the financial damages he caused." Lily stopped, drawing, and looked at Ethan. "Uncle Ethan, does that mean the bad man won't hurt anyone anymore?" "That's right, Lily. He can't hurt anyone anymore." Benedict, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. "And what about Gavin? Will he still have to answer for the crimes he committed?" Ethan looked at his brother. D.A. Almeida said that considering Gavin's cooperation, the fact that he was manipulated, and especially because his information saved other families from being destroyed, he will likely receive an alternative sentence. "What kind of alternative sentence?" Gavin asked. "Community service, mandatory treatment for gambling addiction, and judicial supervision. For 2 years, but no prison." For the first time in months, Gavin smiled, not a smile of selfish relief, but the smile of someone who knew he had made the right choice. That night, after Lily went to sleep and Benedict rested after an emotionally intense day, the two brothers walked through the small yard of Constance's house. "Ethan," Gavin said, "I know what I did is unforgivable. I know I destroyed our family because of my selfishness and weakness." "You destroyed a lot of things," Ethan agreed, "but you also helped rebuild everything when it mattered." "How can you forgive me?" "Because I learned something from Lily," Ethan replied, looking at the lit window of the girl's room. "She taught me that family isn't about being perfect. It's about being there when the people you love need you." "And do you think I can be a better brother from now on?" "I think we'll find out together." The next day, Saturday, the news they had all been waiting for arrived. Morris Shaw had been arrested trying to board a flight to Paraguay. With him was a suitcase containing $300,000 in cash and forged documents proving his intention to flee the country for good. The arrest of Morris Shaw made headlines in the local papers, and dozens of families began to come forward as victims of his schemes. What had started as a personal quest for justice had turned into an operation that exposed one of the largest real estate fraud rings in the history of Crestwood. But for Ethan, the most important moment wasn't seeing Morris handcuffed on television. It was seeing Benedict, for the first time in weeks, completely lucid for an entire day, smiling as he watched Lily teach Gavin how to draw, and birds in the yard. The family had been broken, scattered, almost destroyed, but now, piece by piece, it was being rebuilt on a foundation more solid than before, a foundation based on truth, forgiveness, and the certainty that they were stronger together than apart. 3 weeks after Morris Shaw's arrest, the Caldwell family's life began to take shape again, but not without painful surprises along the way. Ethan's bakeries had been reopened with official apologies from the health department, and the corrupt employees involved in Morris's scheme were fired and prosecuted. The family's land had been officially returned after the judge declared the fraudulent sale null and void. But when it came time to dig for the buried safe, an unexpected discovery shook them all. Ethan, accompanied by Gavin, Constance, and 2 official witnesses, went to the land on a sunny Tuesday morning. The spot where the old family house had stood was now cleared, prepared by Morris for the construction of the supermarket that would never be built. "Dad said he buried the safe under the mango tree in the yard," Gavin said, pointing to where a large tree used to stand before the fire. Using borrowed equipment, they began to dig at the indicated spot. After 2 hours of work, they found the safe exactly where Benedict had said it would be. It was a heavy metal box, protected by a layer of plastic. "Finally," Ethan murmured, wiping the dirt off the safe. $400,000 that can change our situation. But when they opened the safe, in the presence of the official witnesses, they found something none of them expected. It was empty, except for a sealed envelope. "This can't be right," Gavin said, checking if the safe had a secret compartment. "Dad said there was $400,000 here." Ethan opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter written in Benedict's own hand, dated 3 years ago. "My dear sons," Ethan read aloud, "if you are reading this, it means something has happened to me, and you have found my secret hiding place. The money you expected to find here did exist, but I had to use it for a family emergency you never knew happened." The letter went on to reveal that Gavin had approached Benedict 3 years earlier, long before the fire, confessing gambling debts that already totaled $200,000. Benedict had used his savings to pay off those debts, hoping his son would learn his lesson. "I forgave Gavin back then and gave him a second chance," the letter continued. "But I made sure to hide this from Ethan because I didn't want to create conflict between the brothers. I hoped Gavin would tell the truth when he felt ready." Gavin turned pale upon hearing this. I don't remember telling Dad about the first debts. I was always so drunk when I gambled." The letter further revealed that the debts that led to the fire were actually a second cycle of indebtedness, much worse than the first. Benedict had tried to help again, but this time he had no more resources. "That's why I hesitated to sell the house that night," Ethan read. "Not because I didn't want to help Gavin, but because I had already used all my savings to save him once. I was trying to find another solution." The end of the letter contained a specific request. "If anything happens to me, I ask that Ethan take care of Gavin not with anger, but with understanding. Addiction is a disease, and Gavin needs treatment, not judgment. The money that is no longer in this safe has already served its purpose. It saved our family once. I trust that you will find a way to save yourselves again, together." The silence that followed the reading was heavy. Gavin sat on the ground, burying his face in his hands. "He had already saved me once," Gavin murmured, "and I didn't even remember. And then I caused all this again." "Dad knew you were sick," Ethan said, carefully folding the letter. "That's why he didn't give up on you, even after everything. But now we don't have the money to rebuild our lives," Constance said, worried about the practical implications. "Actually," said a voice behind them, "you have more than you imagine." Everyone turned to see D.A. Almeida approaching the property, accompanied by Anthony Fisher and a man in a suit they didn't recognize. "D.A. Almeida," Ethan asked, "what are you doing here?" "I bring good news. This is Mr. Frank Silver from the Crime Victims Compensation Department. He has important information for you." Mr. Silver approached with a folder of documents. Caldwell family, as the primary victims of Morris Shaw's fraudulent scheme, you are entitled to full compensation for the damages caused. What kind of compensation? Ethan asked. Morris Shaw has been forced to liquidate all his assets to compensate his victims. This includes the properties he owned, the funds found in his bank accounts, and the profits obtained through fraudulent activities. Mr. Silver opened the folder and showed an official document. The amount specifically designated for the Caldwell family is $620,000, considering not only the value of the land, but also the profits Morris obtained from the fraudulent sale and the moral and material damages caused. The figure left everyone in shock. It was more money than Benedict had ever stored in the original safe. $620,000, Ethan repeated, hardly believing it. That's right, and there's more. The bakeries that were harmed by the false complaints will also receive additional compensation for lost profits. Gavin looked at his brother with an expression of astonishment. It means you have not only recovered what you lost, but you have enough resources to rebuild your lives on a more solid foundation than before, Mr. Silver explained. D.A. Almeida spoke up. Gavin, there is a specific condition, and for you, part of the amount will only be released after you complete a rehabilitation program for gambling addiction. It's a legal requirement, but also an opportunity to ensure the cycle doesn't repeat. That afternoon, back at Constance's house, the family processed the dramatic changes in their circumstances. Benedict, who had had a particularly lucid day, was sitting on the porch with Lily, watching her draw. "Grandpa Benedict," Lily said, "why did you give all your money to help Uncle Gavin if he'd been naughty?" The girl's question, asked with her usual innocence, sparked a deep reflection in the old man. "Because, my little one, sometimes the people we love do bad things, not because they are bad, but because they are lost. And when someone you love is lost, you don't give up on them. You keep lighting lamps to help them find their way back home." "And did Uncle Gavin find his way?" "He's finding it," Benedict said, looking at Gavin, who was talking seriously with Ethan about the treatment program. "Sometimes it takes time, but love and patience can heal many wounds." That night, Ethan made a decision that surprised everyone. He announced that he would use part of the compensation money to buy a larger house where the whole family could live together. Benedict, Constance, Lily, Gavin after his treatment, and himself. "Why do you want everyone to live together?" Gavin asked. "Because I learned that family isn't just a concept. It's a daily choice to take care of one another," Ethan replied. "And I want to make sure we never get lost from each other again." "And what if I can't fully recover?" Gavin asked, his fears still evident. "Then we'll face that together too," Ethan said, "but this time with honesty, with support, and with the certainty that a real family never leaves anyone behind." Lily, who had heard the conversation from the kitchen, ran into the living room with her sketchbook. She showed a new picture, a large house with many windows and 5 smiling figures in front, each representing a member of her chosen family. "I drew our new house," she said proudly, "with room for everyone to be happy." Looking at that simple drawing, Ethan realized that the 4-year-old girl had captured something that he, in all his adult sophistication, had taken months to understand. True wealth was not in buried safes or legal settlements, but in the people willing to love unconditionally and fight together against any storm. 6 months after the events that changed their lives forever, the Caldwell family finally moved into their new house. It was a spacious residence in a quiet neighborhood of Crestwood, with a large garden where Lily could play freely and enough rooms for everyone to have their own space, yet remain part of the unified family core. Gavin had completed 3 months of the rehabilitation program for gambling addiction and was visibly transformed. He had gained a healthy amount of weight, his eyes had regained their clarity, and most importantly, he had developed a daily routine that included working at Ethan's bakeries, group therapy, and dedicated time to care for Benedict. Benedict, in turn, had stabilized significantly after being treated by neurology specialists. It was discovered that part of his mental confusion had been caused by inappropriate medications he was taking for other conditions. With the correct treatment and the loving environment of the new house, he remained lucid most days. Constance had accepted the invitation to live with them, occupying a ground-floor room with a view of the garden she herself had helped plan. At 78, she had found in the Caldwell family not only a way to honor the memory of her sister Delia, but a true second family, where she felt loved and valued. Lily, now almost 5, had adapted to her new life with the natural joy of resilient children. She attended a nearby school, where her teachers constantly praised her emotional maturity and her ability to make friends easily. She continued to draw her birds, but now they were always colorful, always flying freely under blue skies. On a Saturday morning, as the family was preparing for a special lunch to celebrate their 6th month in the new house, an unexpected visit brought revelations that none of them had anticipated. D.A. Almeida arrived accompanied by a young woman Ethan didn't recognize. She seemed nervous, carrying a folder of documents and constantly looking at Lily, who was playing in the garden. "Caldwell family," said D.A. Almeida. "I'd like you to meet Maria Oliver, the social worker responsible for Lily's case." Ethan felt a cold knot in his stomach. "Lily's case?" Maria approached carefully. "Mr. Ethan, for all these months, while we were dealing with the family's legal issues, Lily's guardianship process was left pending. Now that everything is resolved, I need to address her situation." "What situation?" asked Constance, instinctively moving protectively towards the girl. "Lily has no legal documentation of kinship with the family. She has been under the informal care of Ms. Constance, but technically she needs to be referred to the official child protective system." The silence that followed was devastating. Benedict, who was sitting in a chair in the garden, was the first to speak. "Maria, Lily has been part of this family for over 8 months. She's not just a child we're temporarily caring for. She's a daughter in our hearts." "I understand the emotional bond perfectly," Maria replied, but her voice carried the weight of bureaucracy. "However, there are legal protocols that must be followed. Lily needs to be officially adopted or placed with a registered foster family." "Then we'll formalize the adoption," Ethan said immediately. "It's not that simple. Lily would have to go to a temporary home while the adoption process unfolds, which can take up to 2 years. And preference is always given to young, childless couples." The idea of separating Lily from the family after all they had been through together was unacceptable to everyone present. "Is there any alternative?" Gavin asked. Maria hesitated before answering. "There is one possibility, but it requires a revelation that might be complicated for the family." "What revelation?" asked D.A. Almeida. "During our investigation into Lily's background, we discovered information about her biological family that was not in the initial report." Maria opened her folder and took out certificates and documents. "Lily is not just a child that Ms. Constance was caring for out of kindness. She is Ms. Constance's legitimate granddaughter." "What do you mean, granddaughter?" asked Constance, turning pale. "Ms. Constance, you had a son you never mentioned to anyone. Robert Sanders, who left Crestwood over 20 years ago. Robert is Lily's father." The revelation hit Constance like a lightning bolt. She sat down heavily in a chair, her hands trembling. "Robert? My Robert had a daughter." "He did. Lily's mother was named Carla. Robert and Carla died in a car accident when Lily was 2. The child was in temporary shelters until the authorities located you as the closest living relative." But why did Constance never tell us about Robert? Ethan asked. Constance, with tears in her eyes, finally spoke. Because Robert and I fought before he left town. He wanted to marry a girl I disapproved of, said I was prejudiced, that I wouldn't accept his happiness. He left home promising never to return, and I let my pride speak louder than my mother's love. You never tried to find him? I tried, but whenever I called, he would hang up the phone. I wrote letters that were returned unanswered. Eventually, I stopped trying. Constance looked at Lily, who was playing carefree in the garden. If I had known Robert had become a father, that I had a granddaughter. Maria continued explaining. What this means legally is that Miss Constance has guardianship rights over Lily as a blood relative. An adoption process would not be necessary. It would simply be a formalization of family custody. And can Lily continue to live here with us? Ethan asked. Considering that Ms. Constance resides with you and that Lily is already integrated into the family, yes, it would be the ideal arrangement from the child's welfare perspective. D.A. Almeida smiled for the first time during the visit. In fact, this perfectly resolves the legal situation. Lily stays with her biological family, who is also her family at heart. At that moment, Lily ran towards the group of adults, noticing that everyone was serious. Grandma Constance, why is everyone sad? Constance took the girl into her arms, hugging her tightly. We're not sad, my little granddaughter. We're happy because we discovered something very special. What was it? We discovered that you're not just a girl I take care of because I like you. You are my real granddaughter, the daughter of my son, Robert. Lily processed the information with the naturalness of children. Does that mean I can call you Grandma forever? Forever and ever, Constance replied, crying with joy. And does it mean I'll keep living here with all of you? It means exactly that, Ethan said, kneeling beside the two of them. Lily smiled and hugged everyone around her. That's great! I already knew you were my real family. I just didn't know you were my real family. Later that day, after Maria and D.A. Almeida had left with the signed guardianship papers, the family gathered in the garden for a collective reflection on how life's paths had mysteriously intertwined. Do you realize, Benedict said, watching Lily play with birds that had nested in the garden trees, that if the fire had never happened, if Gavin had never made those mistakes, if I had never hidden at Constance's house, Lily would never have come into our lives. It's true, Ethan said. It was Lily who brought us back to each other. No, Gavin corrected. It was the love you all showed for her that taught me what it truly means to be family. Seeing how you cared for her, how you protected her, how you fought for her. That showed me the kind of man I wanted to be again. Constance wiped the tears from her eyes. And I finally understand why taking care of Benedict never felt like a burden to me. It wasn't just because of Delia, my sister. It was because God knew I needed to be here for when my granddaughter needed me. That night, for the first time in their lives, the Caldwell family slept complete under the same roof. Parents, children, granddaughter, united not just by circumstance, but by the conscious and daily choice to love each other unconditionally. And as Lily slept in her room, surrounded by drawings of free birds, she murmured a prayer of gratitude for the winding path that had led them all home. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel. I promise to bring you videos every day that will make your life happier. Comment what you thought of my story with a rating from 0 to 10, and thank you very much.